Hello and welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics in business and in life and simplify them. And friends, why is it that, you might have a huge Instagram following, you might have a teeny tiny Instagram following, you might have 1,000 bazillion friends on Facebook, but the reality is we feel lonelier now than ever before. What is the deal there? And what I want to know as well is, in this day and age where we feel plugged in and connected in social media, how do we actually make in real life collaborations, community, all of that good juicy stuff in our work and life, like face to face? Aha. So here's my special guest that's going to help me simplify this topic with you and for you today. Her name is Indiana Adams. She's a former actor and style blogger, and she's accepted the role and outfit of a lifetime: a minivan driving, mom jeans wearing, podcast hosting, suburban mother of four. Now, she is your internet bestie as the host of Today by the Way, which is a short and sweet podcast for busy moms. And, the word on the street is her hair is mostly dry shampoo. Like mine, let's be real. I'd like to welcome to the Simplifiers podcast, Indiana Adams. Hey there.
Hi, Mary.
It's so good to see you.
So good to see you.
The reality is this. That all sounds really professional and all the things, but I know Indiana as Dee Dee because I met her way back when in real life in 2012. And let me just share the story really quick for people that are listening. So I went to this brand new church, never known anybody except for one friend, on a Sunday. And, immediately after the service, I met this very friendly, very kind, big bearded man named Matt. And he said, "Oh, right, you're going to come to this small group on Tuesday, right? Because you live in East Austin." I was like, "I am?" He said, "Yep, you're going to come. And it's at, the Adams house. No big deal. It's just right over there." And I'm like, okay. And so I knock on the door of Chris and Dee Dee. This is how I know you, but I'll try to call you Indiana today. I knock on your door, and within 2 seconds of meeting you at the door, you have this great big smile, you have this teeny tiny baby, and you're like, "Here, can you handle this baby?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I guess I can." And ever since then, we have been close friends, even though we live halfway across the world now. What a special memory and way to kick off a friendship. You are the quintessential person of connecting people together with babies.
With babies. I should always carry a baby and just be like, "Hey, can you hold this for me?" And that's how I endear people to me, through small children.
Well, I've watched you grow and flourish from a blogger to a conference planner with the Texas Style Council to a podcaster. And, you really have gone from one triumph to another in your career from what I've seen from afar. Now, I realize that, probably it didn't feel like that in the thick of it for you, huh?
No. I feel like on paper, I could look at my resume and be like, well, that was a lot of tries and fails. But I think a healthier way to look at it is like, those are seasons. Like there was a season for blogging. There was a season for acting. There was a season for my conference. And now I'm in a season of podcasting.
Yeah. And I imagine there are some experience that you learned, key skills when you were a fashion blogger that's now translated into becoming a podcaster. So what skills have transferred over for you?
Well, when I started my fashion blog, I was the first fashion blogger in Austin, Texas. I was not the best, but being the first gets you a lot of leverage.
Yeah.
And so as the first, I got to be in a lot of magazines. I got to go to a lot of store events and openings. And basically my little family became local celebrities. And it was such a fun time. I call that time, it was about 2008 when I started, I call that time in the blog world the Wild Wild West. Mm-hmm. Brands were not sure how, the term influencer was not a thing. This was before Instagram. I got Instagram, I got it on Jude's first birthday because I was like, I really need that iPhone for Jude's birthday so I can document it on Instagram. That was 2010, I think, when I got Instagram. So I started my blog before Instagram was a thing, before influencers were a thing, before people were buying houses with their Instagram money.
It's crazy.
And so brands were really trying to figure this out. What's a fair rate that we pay someone who has a blog? How do we even pitch them? And so I got to lead a conversation at South by Southwest about the brand and blogger partnership and what that looks like. And the room was full because at that time, brands were like, we don't know what we're doing. And so it was just a really neat time to kind of be in on that ground level. And I do feel like podcasting in 2020 is a lot like blogging was in 2010. There's a good base of people who have it figured out. So we have a small pool of mentors that we can ask, okay, how did you handle this? Or what did you do with this pitch? But truly, for a lot of brands, it still is the wild, wild west of marketing. They're like, how do I work with someone who has a podcast? What's a fair market rate? Or what should I expect of someone who's creating content like that?
Right.
So I feel like we're kind of in that same ground level. And thankfully, those negotiation skills that I have from my blog have been able to help me well in this podcasting world.
And what I feel like you're really good at, and I get influenced by you, and then I do it myself in my own business, is you are courageous and you just ask. Like, some people just get so afraid of, oh God, there's no way I could go after that big, huge brand and ask them for free product or ask them to be a sponsor or ask them for whatever, right? And you just do it. And like that, I think, is step one. Having courage, figuring out what the right ask is in the first place, and then doing it, like hitting send on that email.
Yes. I don't fear no.
Yeah.
If there's a no, not a big deal. I'll move on. You didn't think it was a good ROI for you. I think you're wrong. That's why I pitched you.
Yeah.
But the things that I do online, and I really truly believe in, and the people that I'm connected to through my audience or readership, I know that those people, like, they make buys. They have their own mini influence, and that audience has value. And I'm not going to say, oh, I'll just do that post for a free sweater. My time and my years of experience are worth a dollar amount.
Right.
So I have no embarrassment of asking for what I think my time is worth.
Well, and I think that that's where it's really interesting to me to follow your career path and to know you as a friend, is that I think in the fashion blogger early days, mostly women, right? We're doing it because they have a passion for clothes and fashion and hair and makeup or whatever it was that they were blogging and writing about. But they weren't necessarily going into it with a business mindset. Like, this is a business where I have a value of what I'm bringing. I'm bringing engaged followers, readers, listeners, whatever, and you want to connect with those. And I think that's where I think is really interesting for you, is that you bridge those two places together. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think it's a really neat place to be. I think because I have been a voice on the internet for so long, and I have always been very judicious about the brands that I work with. I don't want to work with brands if they don't serve my audience.
Right.
My audience over time, in any medium that I'm on, really trusts my recommendations.
Yeah.
And that has value when I'm pitching a brand. I'm like, I may not have, I don't have 10,000 Instagram followers. I don't have the swipe up, but I had a 70% sponsorship return on any brand that's ever worked with me, because my friends, I really feel like my followers are my friends.
Yes.
They really trust that, okay, if I'm working with that brand, I truly believe in that brand. And if you're following me, we're probably like-minded. So this is a product for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think this is what's quintessentially important to hear. If you have a small business, even if you're like a wedding planner or a photographer, this translates. Like what Dee Dee's talking about right now, it translates because the people that follow you on social media or actually buy your products and services in real life, it's approaching them as if they were humans with real great needs. And, you might have solutions or advice or suggestions that help them with their real great need, right?
Absolutely. And I feel like I do that. I would do that for you, Mary. We're having coffee and you're like, oh gosh, I have this problem. I would recommend something to you as a friend. And so why wouldn't I do that with a larger network who has chosen to follow me? That's the key. I've never tricked, I've never gamed the system for the amount of followers that I have. I don't usually deploy. I've never deployed a loop giveaway because I know that that's shallow engagement sometimes if you don't connect with the right people.
Wait, what's a loop giveaway? Tell us what that is.
Oh, a loop giveaway is when you kind of team up with maybe, the loop can be as large as you want, but let's say it's 9 other influencers.
Right.
And you say, okay, we've all chipped in $100 and we're going to give away this $1,000 Target gift card. But in order to enter, you have to follow all 10 of these influencers. And so it's a way to really get your followers, that number up. However, that engagement number is going to drop. Those are not true followers. Those people are following you because it's like the lottery. They want to win this $1,000 Target gift card. Right. And I know that it's a tactic that works if you can connect with, if you are very, very careful about who you connect with and do the loop. But I've just made the choice to be like, I'm not going to, like, if you're going to choose to follow me, like, it's because you like me, or I'm providing something that you want more of. Yeah. And so I want a really high engagement number in my social media following. And I think that helps the brands that work with me say, okay, she doesn't have 10,000 followers, but her people really trust her and they actually buy the things she recommends.
It's interesting you should say that because I was just listening to a podcast yesterday of a YouTube strategist, and he was saying that one of his clients who has over 6 million subscribers to their YouTube channel, 6 million, you think in your head, okay, YouTube celebrity, must be banking it, must be, all the things. Barely makes about $600 a month from the products that he sells to his audience. And so I think when you hear stories like that, yes, it breaks my heart because like that poor guy's probably hustling really hard to get content out there, has loads of people clicking and following and whatever, but it's all nonsense if they're not engaged, if they're not truly engaged, and connected to whatever you're talking about. It's not always about selling product, but it still should be engagement as well. So, okay, where do we go from here? If we realize that our following numbers are not necessarily the metric to follow as a successful business owner or a successful content creator, but engagement is the place to go, then let's talk about how to help people better connect in this like digital world, right? And, okay, one thing I know about you is true is that you are what you call a self-proclaimed extreme extrovert. Tell us what that means.
Oh, girl. I have a lot of extrovert problems. I feel like I'm very needy because I'm an extrovert. Extroversion does not mean how outgoing you are or how reserved you are. It truly is, where do you recharge? Where do you get your energy? Mm-hmm. And I get my energy, I'm like an energy vampire. I think I get my energy from other people. Yeah. And so when I spend too much time, and I work from home, I do my podcast, and I'm a freelancer for digital social media consulting. Yeah. And so I'm kind of stuck at home or in coffee shops working. I feel like I'm wilting when I haven't talked to other people or bounced ideas off of other people or even had just silly conversation with other adults. Yeah. And so I'm like, I haven't talked to another adult today. I guess I'll go to Target and just look for someone to talk to. And I met one of my best friends and now my business partner at Costco. So I will just go out and troll for people.
Yeah, but I think it's so important because you do understand that this is something that's true about you. And it becomes an asset for you because I think you are a natural connector of people because of this. So where do you think that stems from?
Well, just connecting with people?
Yeah.
I would say, and this is getting way into the psyche here. Yeah. But if you're just listening to this podcast, you can't see me. But if you're watching, you can see kind of what I look like. I am dark. I have black hair. My mom is from Thailand. My dad is half Native American. And I grew up in a town that was predominantly white, a blue-collar town, very small. Everyone knew each other. And I always, just by pure external, I always knew that I was different. I looked different. And I grew up with my grandparents. My dad passed away when I was 3. And being in a small town, everybody knew my story. Everybody just knew, like, this tragedy had happened in our family. And I was being raised by my grandparents. And so for school functions, I had 2 very old people joining me instead of like young, cool parents. I had very old, like gray hair, wrinkly grandparents coming to my stuff that actually, they didn't ever run around with me or they couldn't volunteer to go on the cave trip. And so I just always felt like an outsider. And however, the extreme extrovert in me that did not make me whole away. Oh, I'm different. Let me get in a cave and be sad about that. I'm like, well, I'm different. I have to embrace it. And so it made me just kind of think, eyes up. Like, look for other people who are different. Look for other people that maybe don't have that drive to seek out community or that aren't comfortable being the weirdos. And so a lot of my friends growing up were people who also were being raised by their grandparents, who also just had a little bit something externally different about them. And in high school, this is so funny. This is not anything we talked about prior, but I have this old t-shirt. It's the only shirt I still have from high school. And it says Shiny Happy People. And it was this club that was started in our school just to kind of help the school not to be so cliquish. And so they'd be like, okay, if you were a skater, go hang out with the jocks today. And there was purpose in that. And I was part of the ground floor making that club because I just really felt that our school would be healthier if we could all kind of look outside of ourselves and look outside of our small groups.
Gosh, I love that. I love that as a concept.
Since I was a kid.
No, it's true. But I mean, how many of us are in our late 30s, early 40s or beyond who do exactly like you've just described? We, send the kids off to school, but then we work from home in our little isolated bubble, or we dress from the top up. Not to say that I'm doing that today, but it's because you're on video call, but then you're not actually having that in real life connection with other human beings. I can totally resonate with the story of going to Target. We don't have Target here in the UK, but I have gone to grocery stores just to talk to the friendliest cash register that's there, right? So tell us the story about Travis then, about what happened there.
Yeah, I would love to. So as I said, I was always, looking for people that I felt, oh, maybe they feel like an outsider. And I was trying to pull them into my world or connect them to someone that I think could connect with them. But in college, I met someone named Travis. I would to this day still say he was like the male version of me. We looked similar. His parents were from Hawaii. We were the same major. We went to the same church. We had similar social sensibilities. We were both a little outgoing, but super, super curious about other people. Yeah. So we asked a lot of questions and we really loved getting to know people. And then he made me realize that just because you look like you have everything going on, maybe you don't. He just taught me the concept of eyes up, like look for everyone, not just the people who are obviously on the outside, because we were so similar. Travis, I don't know. We were hanging out in a big group and I just got this sense something was off. I thought, man, he seems lonely. And I was married when I was in college. And so I went home to Chris and I just kind of mentioned, hey, something seemed weird about Travis tonight. Like, I know we were hanging out at a party in a group, but he just seemed lonely. I was like, do you think you'll have time to go over and play guitar with him later this week?
Yeah.
And Chris was like, yeah, I think so. Chris was working and I was in school. And then a couple of days later, I was at Barnes & Noble and I got the call that Travis had committed suicide and that our good friends who were his dorm mates had found him. And it shocked us all. I am still shocked that had happened.
Yeah.
And now I'm just incredibly sensitive. Like, it's like I have a spidey sense. I'm like, that person feels lonely. And even if it's someone that I'm like, I don't know why I think she would feel lonely. I'm like, it looks like she's got everything going for her. And then I just remember Travis, like, eyes up. Okay, how can I connect with her today? Or how can I connect her with someone else today?
And it's critically important, I think, in that. And thank you sharing that story, because I realize it must be hard. I've lost friends to suicide over the years, and it makes me think of them as well. In this day and age of social media and filters and, highlights reels of what people put on Facebook and all the things, you don't actually know what's truly happening under the surface. I'll be the first to admit there are things that I filter and there's things that I don't talk about openly out into the world until I've gotten through that season of whatever it is, right? But I think what I hear you say there is when your intuition speaks up like that, or you get what I call a divine nudge, do something about it, right?
Absolutely. And And this really now informs the work that I do. I met my husband online. I'm not a person that will ever say, oh, social media is evil.
Yeah.
It's the reason why we're all so sad.
Yeah.
I think that I think social media is neutral. I think we can use it to really connect with others if we're using it wisely.
Yeah. So how do you use social media in a positive way then to help build connection with other people or to just check in on them? What's working for you right now?
Well, some things that I do when I think about a person, I text them immediately or say a prayer for them if I'm driving and I can't text them immediately.
Yeah.
And then I'm very purposeful in my planner. I write down who are 5 people I need to connect with, and I try to make them a thing I get to cross off. That sounds terrible, but I make people a part of my to-do list.
Yeah.
And then on social media, I really try not to just be a consumer and just kind of double click heart and like things.
Yeah.
If I'm going to take the time to follow you, there's something about you. Either I know you in real life or we've been friends on the internet for a while, or I really appreciate your content. I take the time to leave a comment. And it's almost like, I don't want to say it's like casting a spell, but it is like when you take the time to leave a comment for someone, you really are like making those intentional steps online to create a deeper connection.
Yeah, yeah. And one thing that I know you do really well, because you've done it a few times with me, and I know that I don't think there is some strategy to it. I think it's just because you are a kind, wonderful, loving person, is you leave me voice messages in my direct messages in Instagram. You've cheered me on in many places of my life. And I think that if you are thinking about just ways to connect with the people who you may never have met in real life or, are your dearest friends, don't forget there's the voice memo part on Instagram's direct messages. It's just that one step further that actually feels very, very special and maybe just the thing that person needs to hear in that moment.
Right. And I actually learned that from a podcaster named Jamie B. Golden. She's at the Popcast. I fangirl over her. I am like weirdly obsessed with everything that their little group does. I'm like,
yes.
I love them all. I love all of them. And so when she left me a voicemail, I fangirled so hard. I have a group text with some girlfriends and we are all huge fans of her podcast. I'm like, oh my gosh, you guys, look who left me a voice memo.
Yes.
And so I realized, I don't have that kind of reach or influence that she has, but I mean, I do have listeners. I do have friends that leave me, like actual friends in real life that are connected with me on social media that maybe I haven't seen in years because I've moved away from Texas or they've moved. And so why wouldn't I just, quickly, hey girl, just thinking about you. It's fun.
And
it's
that's
really
it.
Fun.
Yeah. And again, coming back to what you said earlier, I think the reason why we don't do those things, we go, oh, I don't have any time to do all that. I've got 1,000 people that follow me. It's like, no, what Indiana is talking about here is think about 5 people or the people that do come up in your intuition of like, hey, how is she doing really? And just send a quick voice message to those 5 people today or this week or whatever it is and take it into bits and pieces and small bite size. It makes it a lot more feasible.
And then it becomes habit. Like I would say 2 years ago, this was not easy for me, but now 2 years down the line, I'm like, oh, this is what I do every week or every time I think of someone. This is what I do. It's just part of me now.
And again, I think that also, if we're looking at it from a business point of view, builds engagement because there are people who are probably super fans of your work and go, man, she is so sweet and so kind. And of course I would go over, bend over backwards to help share and spread the word about her new podcast and do all the things. And it is a cyclical win-win, love situation. It's taking that step of doing it and going one step further. So you had mentioned to me in a previous conversation that you don't want your silo to be doorless or windowless. What does that mean?
Well, as an entrepreneur who's working from home and as a mother, life can be lonely. Yeah. I mean, I sit at my little computer, sometimes in my bed. I don't even work at my desk.
Yes.
And I don't talk to other people. Whereas, if I used to have an office job and I would go in and I would get feedback from a boss, I would get help from my teammates.
Yeah.
now I'm kind of in this silo of doing this creative work. And then I do want to speak to motherhood too. I think since you have a lot of female listeners, I will wager a guess that a lot of them are mothers. I used to work for two businesses that served mothers with young children. The number one search term on both of those websites, even though they were parenting websites and marriage focused websites, the number one search terms were like reiterations of lonely. So like lonely, loneliness, alone. That's what people are searching for on websites.
Yeah.
In places that don't actually speak to maybe specifically friendship. And so I'm like, we're all in these silos as mothers and as entrepreneurs. Okay, if that's true, because we can't say, okay, well, let me just not work in this silo. Like motherhood is isolating. It is what it is in this day and age. Like we're no longer parenting from a village, which we need to. But okay, how can I make sure that my silo has windows so I see others? How can I make sure that my silo has a door so I can leave and people can come in? How can I invite other people into my world? And I used to have a friend, Hannah, and I would just send her a text really fast. Hey, I'm running to Target. And we would meet at the Target in between both of our houses and just do our errands together.
Yeah.
Like it was not anything fancy. We did not sit down and have a coffee date and talk business, but we were just getting in each other's lives for 30 minutes while we were doing something I just need to pick up toilet paper. And I'm like, let me do that alongside somebody else.
That's it. That's collaboration. That's in the collaboration in the life side of things, Well, I've got to go to Target. You got to go to Target. Let's do it together. And we get to see each other. And it's a hell of a lot more enjoyable to actually do it together than it is to continue to live life alone, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So that's it. That's just the concept of silos, making sure that your silo, if that's where you are in this season of life, making sure it has windows so you can see others and a door so others can come in.
Yeah. And, I think that what stops us is that now our relationship to our phone is if somebody calls me, I go, what is the nerve of them to call me? I get, like this is
don't ever call me.
Right.
In the world? My mother-in-law, she sent me a funny text yesterday and she's like, hey, make sure you're disinfecting your phone because phones are so dirty. She's like, and you're putting that up to your face all the time. I'm like, I never put my phone to my face. What are you talking about?
So it may be that, jumping from no communication to 2-hour-long conversations with your girlfriends, probably too big of a leap. But what Indiana's saying here is that if you can think of your 5 closest female friends, or even friends who you just want to be closer with, you want to peel another layer of the onion with them and get a little bit more intimate and vulnerable with, just reaching out to them, say, hey, I'm going to be intentional this month about, really connecting with you and with a few other girlfriends. I'm going to send you text messages. And if you can't make it, no sweat. Like, don't feel guilt or shame or embarrassment that you always keep saying no, but that's okay. I'm going to keep asking and I'm going to keep pursuing you. And then that's also beating down whatever wall or barrier they might have of like, ooh, I don't want to text her. She's probably really busy. Like that's the voice that goes in my head of why it stops me from being intentional and texting people and say, hey, let's go to the park.
Right. And I do want to add, it doesn't have to be 5 people that you are close friends or 5 people that you want to connect with. I have found so much joy in reconnecting with people that I have let fall off the radar.
Yeah.
And that's really embarrassing because like, oh man, I haven't texted Hannah in a year, like since she moved away. And I think it's totally okay to just say, you don't even have to apologize. You can just say, hey, I just drove by this thing and I thought of you. Or, I don't know why I just thought of you, but I did. And I hope you're doing great.
Yep.
And that's it. Like, that's it. You don't have to overthink it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, again, don't get offended if people, say no or they don't respond back. I just, putting yourself out there and sending that message, you never know. It might brighten somebody's day and be exactly what they needed to hear right in that moment as well.
Yes, that happened to me. Someone named Erin Lochner, she has a blog at Design for Mankind. Mm-hmm. I've only met her twice in real life, both times at blogger conferences. Out of the blue, just totally out of the blue, she sent me a text and said, I don't know why, but I just thought of you and I said a prayer for you. And I texted back and said, you don't know this, but I'm sitting in my bed crying because I'm feeling overwhelmed about kind of some family choices that we had to make in growing our family and fostering and all that sort of. And I'm like, I am just so glad that you took the time to tell me that you thought of me and that you took the time to say a prayer. And it that's all I needed to kind of dry the tears and be like, I feel seen.
Yeah.
I feel loved.
Yeah. And you feel closer as well. And you don't feel maybe as isolated. That's the work of a divine nudge, right? And we each have to, I'm saying this for myself, I'm getting better and better every year I get older, to listen to the nudge and then not only listen, but take action as soon as possible after it. It never is wrong, ever in my life, whenever that happens. So yes, do the thing. So I want to bring it back to a business place. So talking about building community and creating deeper relationships within your work. So you've got this beautiful new podcast. You have built this audience out of nothing. Like things are starting to grow and happen in magic and amazingness, right? Tell us a little bit of what's working for you right now to build community and create deeper relationships with your listeners to your podcast today, by the way.
Well, I have learned so much. Let me paint a little bit of a backstory. I had a podcast with my husband in 2017, and we got almost 20 episodes in, and we fizzled out. And it was a little bit of a blow to my ego because I came into the podcast already with sponsors, already with a healthy Instagram following. So we were set up for success, and we fizzled out because I didn't have a why. There was not a woman or a person that I thought of like, who am I serving? Why am I making this content? I thought, oh, let's just have fun and make a podcast, which it was fun for a little bit. I didn't have a why. And then I didn't know how to handle all of the moving pieces that go with being a creative entrepreneur. Like when I'm talking marketing, sustainable work practice, having office hours, I didn't have a handle on any of that. And so when it failed, I just bided my time and thought, I still want to be in that world. I got a taste of it. And I firmly believe that podcasting is kind of the perfect place for me. I'm not a visual person. I'm not a photographer. Blogging was a little bit off for me. I did not really care about fashion. I'm like, I just like people and I kind of like going to thrift stores. So, podcasting felt more authentic to all of the things that I had studied in college, all of my passions that I had as a child. So I knew I still wanted to be in that world. So I bided my time and said, I want to explore that, but I also don't want to have to handle all of the minutia that goes with being a business owner. So I'm going to wait for an opportunity to work on a podcast that I do not own. And so the opportunity came to me to actually work for 2 shows. I still run social media for one. And then I got to host another show in the exact market that I wanted to work in, which is serving mothers and women. So I did that for 2 years and really learned some valuable on-the-job training. Like, what do I like? What do I not like? Where is there a need in this market? What kind of show kind of could fill a need? And who do I really want to serve? And I learned so much in that 2 years, and I didn't have to sweat. Like, okay, now I have to make sure the numbers of the show are good so I can have sponsors. Like, I got a paycheck every month because I was working for someone else. I didn't get the ego boost of saying, I own this show, this is my business. But man, those 2 years of putting in the work and really figuring out what is sustainable for me when I do launch was huge.
And so you've got this new show called Today, by the Way, and you're moving towards a model where you do 5 shows in a week, every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, right? And, I listen to your show. I'm one of your devoted listeners. And for me, even your last podcast, I was one of your devoted listeners because it's like, I love my friend so much. And I love hearing her voice in my earbuds when I'm on the treadmill or whatever, because it truly is like having you here with me in my silo or wherever I am out in the world. What else has helped that become as a success that it is so far now? What's the secrets, do you think?
So working for the other 2 shows really honed me in into like, okay, this is what I like. This is what I don't like. What I don't like, and maybe you can speak to this. What I didn't like is trying to schedule 2 co-hosts and a guest. Like, especially in the motherhood space. we all have crazy babies. We all have a lot going on. And that was very difficult. And so I'm like, okay, now I'm doing a solo cast. If I want to take that piece out.
Yep.
So then I thought, if it's just me, gosh, would I want to hear me talk for 45 minutes? No, I do not. So immediately that informed, okay, I'm going to do a short show. And then I have a commute after I drop my kids off from school. I have a 20-minute commute that's kid free. And in that time, I wanted a show that was just for me. Like, I'd been listening to kid friendly stuff for the first hour of the drive while they were in the car.
Yeah.
I'm like, I want something just for me as I'm getting ready to start my day. And so I went to She Podcast to actually figure out how to do a different podcast. I went to learn how to do a narrative. But the more I talked to other people about doing this other show, I'm like, what do you guys think about this 15-minute solo cast? Every woman I talked to was like, do it. So it made me reevaluate. I actually put the narrative podcast on hold in order to do this one. And I think that's why it's so successful. The content, it really is informed at every point from my listeners and then the people who are in the same market that I'm trying to serve. So I have mom friends who don't listen, and I'm like, why do you not listen to my show? Or why do you not listen to podcasts? And I'm constantly seeking feedback.
Yeah.
Even at the 3-month mark, I just did a listener survey to find out, how can I serve you better? And I learned something new about the people who listen to my show. They actually skew much younger than me, and their children are much younger than mine. And so this whole time I'd been kind of saying, I'm your internet bestie. But really what people are listening to my show, what I'm finding is the majority of them are listening and thinking of me as an older sister.
And that nuance of that's slightly different, isn't it? Then you go, oh, the pain point is this, and the solution, how I show up in the world, how I do my podcasting or the partnerships I bring in, then have to serve that person who's slightly different. And that's listening, that's asking smart questions, that's evolving as the product and the project evolves as well, right?
And I've seen that happen with photographer friends. I have a girlfriend that does kind of every picture on my website. She's now a personal branding photographer, where she started in the wedding and children world. And that was a pain point for her. She's like, oh my gosh, I can't spend any time with my family because I'm out every Saturday with weddings. She's like, or kids are really squirrely. It's hard to photo them. And so, I'm like, what about just being a personal brand photographer? And she's like, yes, that's actually what I'd love to do. I was like, well, then just market yourself as that, and the tide will turn.
Yeah. And there's truth to that. We talk a lot about ultimate ideal client, but how that translates to podcasters as ultimate ideal listener. So your UIL, the person that, if you can describe that girl or guy down to the T and understand she's a vegan and she drives a Toyota Corolla and she, has a 20-minute commute to take her kids back and forth to daycare or whatever. But then where I take it one step further is, well, tell me about her fears, like her greatest fears. That's her future negative projection of her life or her work, of what she thinks is going to happen. What are her present pains? So at 2:00 in the morning on the verge of tears, what is she really struggling with right now? Not sort of
Why is she typing loneliness into a parenting website?
That's it, right? That's present pain. And that's real. Not just like, oh, I'd really like to get my car washed. No, that's a kind of pain, but like, what's the real pain? And then the hope and vision. What is her positive future hope that, becoming connected with your business, your podcast, your blog, or whatever, that you'll help her get to point B. Where she's at is point A, where she's going is point B. And that's what you're saying here in other words of like just getting super clear on who that girl is that you serve through your podcast. It's brilliant.
When we spoke at Mom 2.0, you named that person. You're like, that's Emily. Like you gave her a name and you described her. And I thought that was so brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think about her every time we book a guest, we select the topic, we put anything out in our podcast and out in the world in the Simplifiers. Yes, 100%.
Mine's Amy.
Oh, I love it. Amy, if you're listening right now, I'm giving you a virtual high five. Psh, you're here. It's happening. Amy, meet Emily. You guys are going to be friends. But yes, again, coming back to collaborations, I think that, you're really good at like you say, keeping your eyes up, seeing who's out there in the world who might just be struggling. B, building community in real life. I think that's really important. But then you also do such a great job of building community in this social media online world that sometimes feels like a fantasy as well. Is there any final tips there on helping to build collaborations or community or connection?
I mean, just in terms of final tips, oh gosh. I mean, just taking the time just to make it a habit to leave thoughtful comments, to if someone asks, can you leave a review on Apple Podcasts? By golly, leave a review on Apple Podcasts.
Yeah. And it may seem like such I'll do that later, but it really does help podcasters like us spread the word and grow so that we can serve the Amy's and Emily's in the world as well.
Yes.
So again, I want to remind everybody that you can listen to Indiana on her podcast called Today by the Way. You can go to her website, todaybytheway.com, or wherever you're listening to this podcast right now, you can search it up and find it. You are doing such great work out there, and I just really want to encourage you as one of your cheerleaders, keep going. You have no idea where this is taking you, and I see the vision, and it's going to be beautiful. So yes, I encourage you.
Thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm. So I have a few questions that I'd like to ask you that I ask everybody that comes on the podcast.
Ooh, okay, yeah.
First and foremost, what's one book or blog or even another podcast that you're consuming these days that you feel is either inspiring you or poking holes and challenging your belief system?
Every Monday through Friday, I listen to a podcast called The Newsworthy, and it's by Erica Mandy, and it's unbiased news in 10 minutes a day. I am inspired by her because she can create content Monday through Friday.
It's incredible.
I mean, and she's pushing it out. It sounds great. It's really well done, but also it's informing me and it's making me think deeper about issues that she brings up. I'm like, oh, she's been talking a lot about politics or about the politics behind the coronavirus. And it makes me find other sources to go more into that because she doesn't really go super deep. She is really unbiased, just presenting the news as headlines in 10 minutes a day. And it's making me suss out, well, how do I feel about that?
And, again, what you put into your ears, what you consume with your eyes, what you eat with your mouth, all these things change how you perceive and experience the world. So, yes, I love hearing about other podcasts that I have not heard about hers yet. We'll put a link in the show notes for people if you guys want to check that out as well. So tell us, who's one person in your network that you just feel is up to brilliant things right now? We could shine a spotlight on them, and who knows, maybe one day we'll have them on the podcast as well.
Ooh, you should have Desiree Indress from the Minimalish podcast on. I was on her show, and it was so interesting that she asked me to be on her show because she had heard me on another podcast say that I was anti-minimalism. And so instead of just kind of writing me off, she said, I want to talk to her.
Yeah.
How can you be anti-minimalism? Because that's her thing. That's what she does.
Yeah. So
instead of writing me off, she sent me an email. She's like, I want to know more about that. How did you get to this place? And can we talk about it in a public space? And I said, absolutely, girl. And we found out that we actually have more in common than not in common. And she's just doing really cool work in the world. She calls it grace-filled minimalism.
Yeah.
My rub with minimalism was that I thought it was very restrictive, and I had lived that life for about a year and then felt really sad because I got rid of a bunch of the clothes that I liked and books that I read. But we ended up landing very close to each other. So I think you should have her on. She's doing really cool work around that conversation.
I remember when that episode came out between you and Desiree, and I was like, ooh, this is going to be interesting. And it really was. It was such a great conversation. And, that's also a truth in life, right? If you just surround yourself with people who are pretty much like you, there's no diversity in the conversation. So it is nice to have some outliers that go, hang on, what do you mean by that? And you can have really rich conversations that way. So I believe gratitude and simplicity go hand in hand. Tell me, what's one thing you're grateful for these days?
I am just so grateful for community. I have a great church community. I have a really wonderful network of friends that live all over the country. I was trying to do a map. I'm like, could I do a road trip and see someone in a different state every night? And I'm just really, really grateful for that. I know that that is not, that doesn't come easy for a lot of people, and that's not where some people are.
Yeah.
But right now I have a lot of healthy community around me.
Yeah, I am appreciative to be inside that community, even though I'm on the other side of the planet
Yes.
with you. So again, you can find Indiana on Instagram. That's probably where you hang out the most, right? Where people can connect with
Yes.
you. So today, by the way, is the show's Instagram, or you can just check out her personal Instagram, which is Indiana Adams, and then her website, todaybytheway.com. So Dee Dee, I just want to thank you so much for coming on to the podcast today. And I'm just going to go ahead and say it out loud right here, right now. In 2020, I'm going to come see you in real life and hug your babies and see you and have good times in Georgia. That's happening. Okay.
Yes. Let's make it happen.
So my final question for you is this. Someone somewhere is listening to this episode right now, and she's chuckled along with us, but she's also probably been that girl who has typed into Google how to solve loneliness. She's feeling isolated. She is so far away from the ideal of living in community, doing life together with other people, creating collaborations. That just seems so far away. If you could whisper one thing into her ear right now to encourage her, what would it be?
I would tell her to not grow weary of doing good things, that her desire to want to be in community, her exhaustion from pursuing and pursuing and pursuing others and seeing no return, that's godly, that it's divine. It was made into her. We were made to be in community, and I would just tell her to not give up.
Yeah,
and to remember there may have been a season in your life where you couldn't say yes, and to give grace to the people that maybe keep rebuffing your invites or not stepping into your world. Keep inviting.
And one day you're going to get the invitation to come over to somebody's house, and they're going to knock the door open with a big old smile and hand you a 3-month-old baby. And you're going to be like, okay, here we go. Dee Dee, thank you so much for your time. Big
Thank
love.
You for having me.
Mwah, mwah, mwah. Big love for
Texas
you.
forever.
Texas forever.